would start getting death threats. I think we're going out of business. Everyone should find other work.
What the heck, limited run? I thought this was limited.
People sending me emails, calling me the worst things imaginable, saying like, I hope you die, I hope you burn, I wanted this game. Screw limited run, this game's $90 now.
My first question is, why does everybody hate you?
Limited Run Games is one of the largest publishers of physical indie games in the world. Since 2015, they've generated over $150 million in revenue and have given physical releases to hundreds of games that otherwise would have only been available digitally. But as much growth as they've seen in the last 9 years, they've also seen their share of controversy. Many gamers and collectors have accused them of caring more about quantity than quality, artificially inflating market prices, and even being dishonest about the number of copies they're releasing. So I drove all the way to North Carolina to the only physical video game store owned by Limited Run. Their CEO Josh has agreed to show me the store, give me some Switch game recommendations, and let me hit him with my spiciest questions about how he grew the business and why their practices are so controversial.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for having me out. I wanted to open by asking you, when I searched Limited Run Games on YouTube, the results were almost as bad as if you were to search Phoenix Resale on Reddit. So my first question is, why does everybody hate you?
So I'm self-aware enough to admit that there are a lot of reasons that people have taken umbrage with us, but I think one of the main things that I've picked up on is we take a really long time to ship our products.
The main problem that I think everyone can agree with is turnaround time, because somewhere along the way, they got so big that turnaround time became an absolute nightmare.
And a lot of that comes out of the fact that we keep them open pre-order. So in order to make them open pre-order, which allows anybody who wants the products to get them, we have to start manufacturing them at the end of pre-orders. So it means that we can't start the process of manufacturing, which takes several months until those pre-orders have closed, which is very different from ordering on Amazon and then just getting the thing. And I get it. We're in a society now where it's like everyone wants everything kind of, the minute they order it, because we're kind of trained that way. So it's a unique experience, and it leads to a lot of people not being super happy about it, especially when it's collector's editions that can take a year or more to manufacture because of the components inside. But the only way we could speed that up is to make our collector's editions not as cool. The cooler we do something for a collector's edition, the longer it takes to manufacture.
Right.
And, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because it means more people buy it, but then more people are left waiting a really long time, and then they get mad and angry. And I think, we've made a lot of strides recently to try to address that and start giving people more updates, because I think that was really our big problem in the past, is we were kind of quiet. We have somebody now who is kind of focused on responding to customers, and I think that will help things a lot. But there's also people that, they don't like us because they feel like, our products are arbitrarily limited. And they're not. We started the model that we have here of doing limited prints because we came out of the development world. And when we were developers, we noticed that we were having trouble staying in business because people were waiting for our games to be a penny or 10 cents or whatever in a sale.
On sale, like on Steam.
Yeah, or a humble
like
bundle, something like that. Or worse, we were putting our game in this thing called Indie Gala. And Indie Gala was like, on Wednesday, it's buy one, get 5 free. So you get 6 copies of the game for the penny you pay for the bundle. So it's like, I was getting paid literally fractions of a penny for my game. And it's like, how do you sustain a business of developers on selling copies of your game for a fraction of a penny? And the only way to do that is to get people to somehow pay full price for your game. And the only way to convince people to pay full price for a game is to know, like, it's not going to be around long enough to become a penny or to become $5 or to become whatever. That worked out. Throughout our first couple years of releasing games, we saved a number of indie developers from going out of business because they were finally able to sell their games for enough value that actually kept them in business. Rather than, just trying to scrape by on the bare minimum. So the nature of being limited was driven by wanting to protect and preserve the value of the games themselves. It was not to artificially inflate a market or just arbitrarily be like, it's limited and put a gun against people's heads. It was to say, these games are worth paying the full price for, and these devs deserve that, because our deals that we make with them, most of the sale goes to our partners. It doesn't go to us. So, it really was out of a place of concern for our partners and the developers we were working with.
Yeah. We'll get a little bit more into the spicy stuff later, but first I wanted to ask you, when I asked you before if you had a favorite failure, you mentioned a moment that actually was before Limited Run's history, pretty early on in your development studio. Would you mind telling that story?
Yeah, so prior to Limited Run Games, I was actually an indie developer. So I had started a company fresh out of college called Mighty Rabbit Studios, and we spent 2 years developing this game called Saturday Morning RPG. Throughout the development, I did not pay myself anything. I was just, always pay my employees before myself, and we had basically no money. I think we had $40,000 to start the company on, and that was it. So stretching that out across 2 years was insane. I ended up massively in credit card debt. I was like, I think $30,000 in credit card debt at the time, and I was sustaining myself by buying and selling used games, which I had done, for years prior as well. That's how I paid for my college education without having to get loans.
I've heard there's some money in that.
There is, at least there was at the time. In 2007, when I was doing it to pay for my college education, there was a lot of stuff that I could find, and I love doing it because I love games. So for me, it was a way, I was broke, I had no money. It was a way for me to temporarily own these games that I wanted to own if I actually had money. After developing Saturday Morning RPG, we put it out. It was this critical success. We got a lot of press coverage. We were featured by Apple, all of these things, but it just didn't pan out commercially. We were prepared to have all this success. We're going to pay down our debt, we're going to pay down our bills, and it didn't work out that way. And from that failure, I had to learn to be adaptive. I had to learn to figure out, how do you emerge from a failure stronger? And we ended up fighting for this deal to make another game, Breach and Clear. Breach and Clear ended up being, I think we were paid $60,000 to build a demo for this game. But then we ended up building the entire game for that amount. We didn't have any kind of revenue share in it or anything like that. We just wanted to prove our worth, and hopefully that would lead to more work.
Right.
That game ended up making several $1 million for our partner, so they decided to fund a sequel. The sequel had 3 publishers, and the 3 publishers all had different ideas about what they wanted. So we had to make a game that was 3 different games in one. It was 11 months with 10 people, which is insane.
Wow.
It should have been way more of a train wreck than it was, but obviously it wasn't a financial success because it was trying to be too many things at once, and it wasn't a master of any of the things it did. So our partner was like, okay, we're not doing any more sequels, we're leaving you. And we were left with, this is 2015, we were left with no additional work. And we had $10,000 in the bank, and they were like, parting present, you can port the original Breach and Clear to Vita. We don't care what you do with it because it's the Vita and nobody cares about the Vita. So we were like, it's all we got, let's do it. So we ported Breach and Clear to the Vita, and then it sold miserably, as anybody would expect a Vita game in 2015 to do.
And at that point, what was the financial state of the company? Because you were in pretty dire straits.
And we had
point,
$10,000 left and a staff of 10 people. So, do the math there. I'm still paying myself nothing at that point, and the other 9 people, they need something somewhat livable. So it's we basically had a month left. We did Breach and Clear for Vita as fast as we could, put it out. It made another $10,000, so it's replenish it one more month, whatever. But then there was this kind of moment where I felt like we were going to go out of business. We had nothing else at that point. Breach and Clear on Vita did nothing, and I was at a crossroads. I actually sat everybody at the company down. I said, I think we're going out of business. Everyone should find other work at this point. We're throwing in the towel or whatever. So what surprised me in that moment, though, was that all of my employees rallied behind, and they were like, we're going down with the ship. We're going to stick here. We're going to go down with the ship. We don't care. We'll figure out our other jobs later. And that inspired me to push through and figure it out. And I took a job teaching at a local community college, teaching programming. So I was doing that, running Mighty Rabbit Studios, and buying and selling used games still, because that was the only way I could pay my bills, even though I was racking up credit card debt in the process. So I was doing 3 jobs, and then I was like, you know what? If my employees believe in this as much as they do, I'll take out a personal loan. So I took out a personal loan, $85,000, worst terms imaginable, lendingclub.com, where they will lend anybody money. It's just predatory terms. And I used that to keep our development company open. And the $10,000 we had in our bank account, I used to create a physical run of Breach and Clear on the Vita, because in my mind, I wanted people to be able to remember that we had made this game. If it was just available digitally, at some point it would disappear into the ether and people would never remember it. Because when you think about games, like, people still remember horrible NES games because they're physical, they're cartridges, they change hands, people see them at stores.
Right.
Like, they have a legacy by being physical. But think about the Xbox Live Arcade on 360. How many horrible Xbox Live Arcade games can you remember these days? And I'm not saying Breach and Clear is horrible,
Sure.
but like, with the amount of digital games that come out now, digital games are prone to being completely forgotten. So I wanted to give that game a legacy, show people that we had been around, that we had done something, that we were there, like we didn't want to just disappear and then say these 5 years of struggle were nothing. So we made that game physical, and I brought on a friend that I had working with me, Douglas, who had been doing a lot of testing, and he helped me launch Limited Run. We started going to communities of collectors, talking about how we were doing this physical run of our game, and really trying to rally some support behind it. And what surprised me was when we put this product up, it sold out within 2 hours. Every copy of it, and it was this instantly validating thing. It was like we had taken what little money we had left in our bank account and it multiplied it to an extreme degree, which allowed me to continue operations at Mighty Rabbit and start paying that loan down. And then from there, we were able to do our next game. We took Saturday Morning RPG, that first game we made, ported that to Vita, PS4, physical run of that, sold out again real quick, even faster this time. And then other developers started reaching out. What was wild was the first developer that reached out ended up being the developers of Oddworld, which was this legendary PS1 game. So to have them reach out was this instantly validating thing. And from there, like, Epic was like, if they're working with you, we'll work with you. And then from Epic, we go to, these very popular indie devs that we worked with in that first year. And then we did Star Wars, Castlevania, Doom, and it was just a snowball from there.
So if I could go back just a little bit, you're $86,000 in the hole. You're at a crossroads in your business and on the brink of potential financial ruin. What gave you the confidence and the belief in this idea that you had? Because we have a very business-heavy audience who is thinking about, getting into various businesses of their own. How would they go about making that decision and the risk assessment?
So for me, what gave me the confidence was just knowing that I really personally cared about video games, like physical video games. I've collected physical games for my entire life. I still collect them. I love them. I love every aspect of it. And I was very passionate about it. And I knew that if I cared about having these games physically, like, there would be other people out there that also wanted it. That was really what I knew what drove me towards that, was knowing that there are other people out there that if I love this as much as I do, there are going to be other people who want it. And if nobody else is providing this service, I'm filling a niche that needs to be filled. Because at the time, take it for granted now that there's 30, 40 publishers doing this, but in 2015, the only similar things were Retro City Rampage, which VBlank had done, and that was their own game. They weren't doing anybody else's titles. There was Gaijin Works, which had done Class of Heroes 2G on PS3, but outside of that, nobody was doing direct-to-consumer physical games. And obviously, that was a huge opening in the market, and just knowing that I have this passion for it made me know that I could approach that confidently. And then there was this thing in the back of my head. I was like, if it doesn't work out, I get to bulldoze all of these games, because that was what we were going to do. It was like,
like physically bulldoze them?
Just for, before I have to go live in a gutter somewhere, we were just going to pile them up and run them over with a car. And just celebrate how stupid the decision was if it didn't work out. But thankfully, we didn't have to do that, and we were able to, because the mindset at that point was sell what we can sell, and if whatever doesn't sell, we'll just have fun running it over or dropping it off at a Goodwill or whatever. I don't know, but...
So fortunately, it didn't come to that. Limited Run was born out of that experience. Has it been pretty much smooth sailing since then?
I mean, we've had a lot of ups and downs. Our original model for Limited Run was printing a certain amount of games and then selling that limited amount. What benefit that provided was it addressed the problem we have now, taking forever to ship, because at that point we were just like, it's in hand, boom, it goes out the day we sell it, which was fantastic. But the downside to it was it's impossible to know how many copies of a game you need to print. It just doesn't, there's no reality where you can look at a game and say, exactly this many copies are what you need. Right. So it was just this cascading effect of every time we had a game where we were slightly under or massively under, I would start getting death threats. Just people sending me emails, calling me the worst things imaginable, saying like, I hope you die, I hope you burn, I wanted this game. It was absolutely miserable. And then it all came to a head with Night Trap on PS4. You know, this game was historically regarded as one of the worst games of all time. I loved it because I'm a big FMV nerd, I'm a big Sega CD fan. So for me, I was like, I want to do this game, but you could look at any list of worst games of all time and it would be there in the top 10.
Yeah.
So I was like, 4,000 copies, that's going to be enough. It was not enough. We sold out in half a minute. It was like everything was gone. And I started seeing videos pop up just one after another on YouTube just saying, F limited run, F them, they're horrible, they're terrible, they're anti-consumer, they're garbage. And every time our customers were missing a release, they were like, screw limited run, I'm never coming back. So we started seeing our customer base shrinking. So, you know, now that people are in this thing of being able to get any game they want and then having to wait for it, they're like, I wish everything was in hand. Because the grass is always greener on the other side. Like, when everything was in hand, people were like, I wish I could always get what I wanted. But there's a weight on that. And now that there's a weight on it, they're like, I wish everything was just in hand. And it's like, there's no winning approach here. To me, the winning approach is let everybody be able to get the games they want and then have that weight. Because, you know, at the end of the day, a weight's, you know, it means you can at least get the thing you love. But not being able to get the thing you love just seems far more frustrating in my mind. So,
right.
You know, I am very happy with the model we're at now, even though it comes with the downsides that it does.
I want to ask you more about that model a little bit later, but right now I'm in the middle of working on my Switch collection. I'm wondering if you could give me a few limited run Switch game recommendations, because we're here in this gorgeous limited run retail store. I brought a few of my personal favorites from my collection to maybe give you some inspiration. Would you be down for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so the 4 games that I brought as we're in front of the fantastic Switch section here are obviously the classic Celeste.
Yes.
In a similar vein, Super Meat Boy. A couple of 2D platformers here. Rivals of Aether, 2D
Great
platform fighter, which I love. And maybe, honestly, my favorite, I would say the most underrated limited run game is Duck Game.
Yeah.
Arcade, party game, shooter, so freaking fun. Based on this somewhat eclectic mix, what do you recommend?
If I'm recommending to you specifically based on those,
Yeah.
I don't know where it is on our shelf. Towerfall is the game that I would recommend above everything else, and it looks like we don't currently have any copies. That
what
game
dictates like what games are here versus online? Are these the same ones that are in stock online?
So when we sell a game, we have to produce a certain amount of extras, either for returns, damages, and we have to produce quite a lot because we can have catastrophic mail failures. And by catastrophic mail failures, I mean something like on our 3rd release, Oddworld New and Tasty, French Customs decided they didn't want to let any of our games through. We're talking hundreds of copies of New and Tasty on PS4. We had to use all of our extra promotional copies to try to figure it out, and like even then we didn't have enough. Since then, we've always said we're going to account for catastrophic errors. If for some reason the boat carrying all of our European shipments gets sunk and we lose 800 copies of the game, we're accounted for. Granted, 800 is that's a stretch.
Sure.
We're not producing 800 extras of everything.
So some of those make their way here.
Yes, these extras sit in our warehouse until we do a blowout sale, which is very deliberate. Like, hey, we're selling these in stock at leftovers, but that's once a year. And the only way to get them outside of that is events like PAX or this retail store.
That makes sense.
So the retail store is all of our leftovers, but since our products are truly limited, you know, we do one production run, the store's just selling leftovers. When they sell out, that's it.
Yeah.
We're gone. We're out of copies. So
Sorry,
you know,
I distracted you from your mission here.
That would explain why Towerfall is not here. But Towerfall is from Matty Thorson, who did Celeste. And it was a 4-player couch multiplayer game that is absurdly good, like Duck Game, that premiered on this very obscure console called the Ouya. And I feel like Duck Game is partially inspired by Towerfall.
Wow.
So I would highly recommend Towerfall. The other thing is if you like, challenging platformers, we've got Super Meat Boy Forever, the sequel to Super Meat Boy. That is a must-have in terms of, if you're a fan of Super Meat Boy, you want to get a handle around that.
Love it.
So those are kind of my recommendations based on your personal choices there. But I've got some of my own.
Yeah, what are your overall favorite limited run games ever?
Yeah, so my favorites, and I don't want to seem too cliche here, but
okay.
I love getting to work on things that connect back to my childhood. So getting to do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge was a huge thing for me because I grew up during the height of Ninja Turtles mania. So getting to do anything related to Ninja Turtles was like a dream come true. But also, getting to do these two games, which are my favorite Star Wars games of all time, this was a big deal for me because I also was a massive Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like I only care about the licensed games, but there's something about working on...
It's special.
Yeah, something that like really impacted you as a kid and getting to be involved in that in some capacity.
Were those previously only on Xbox? Is that right?
Yeah, so they were originally Xbox games, but they were ported to Switch by Aspyr, and they were originally not going to get physical releases, so we were lucky enough to negotiate a deal to make that happen.
What else? I'm rubbernecking a little bit in this store because there's so much cool stuff to look at. What do I need to make sure to not miss while I'm here?
So the things to not miss are the pre-owned section. A lot of people probably would not expect the limited run store to sell anything.
Is that the stuff back here?
Yeah, so a lot of people would not expect us to sell anything but limited run titles, but we've got this great pre-owned section. One of the things that I love about our pre-owned section is if somebody comes in to trade a limited run title, we don't sell it for market value. We sell it for whatever the original MSRP was. So we very deliberately do not scalp our own products. When they come in, we tell people we're up front, like, hey, listen, if you're trading at limited run products, you're not going to get what they're worth online. And surprisingly, a lot of people are okay with that. They're like, whatever. Like, I'm happy to trade these back into the limited run store and make another limited run fan happy when they discover these products.
Yeah.
So, the trade-in section, the pre-owned zone, can be a treasure trove of limited run titles that were missed, but also, I'm a big game collector, so I love this section because I get to keep my eye on, like, hey, anything cool come in for my collection. So, just today you saw me pick up Ribbit King for GameCube.
Ribbit King, yep.
So, yeah, I love this section. This is kind of my happy place here, is this pre-owned zone. The other thing that we have here that I think is really interesting, though it's a little empty right now, is our damaged section where we have customer returns that are sold at a discount.
Interesting.
The games run fine, but these are things that were sent back by customers to be replaced or whatever.
These are below original retail.
Yeah, so these are all marked down from original retail, and the longer they sit on the shelf, the more they get marked down. So a lot of these collector's editions are kind of, 30%, 60%, somewhere in that range.
Right.
But it's a great way to get limited run products marked down. Like, for instance, 30% off Super Meat Boy for Vita, and this collector's edition is in very rough shape, but the actual game itself in there is in perfect condition. And
you have the figure, and
this is a Vita game that I got death threats over when we sold out of. So, the retail store provides an opportunity for people to be able to find releases that they may have missed. And that's what I love about it.
So if you're watching and you're someone who sent Josh a death threat, guess what?
You can revert your death threat and take it back because it's here.
On this channel, we are very money positive. What are you able to say about the kind of numbers that Limited Run is doing?
Yeah, so I've been fairly public in this. It's on our LinkedIn profile, but since starting the company, we've done over $250 million in sales. So
I think the LinkedIn may be a little outdated. I saw 150 million.
Yeah, it's over $250 million now in sales, and that sounds like I should be like Scrooge McDucking into like a money bin of money, but that's not really the case, because like I said earlier, the majority of what we get goes to our partners, the developers who own the software that we release. So, at the end of the day, we don't actually have very high margins for Limited Run itself, but in contrast to my previous business, this is a wild success.
Absolutely.
And I am able to actually pay myself a salary now and live a comfortable life. So that's...
I mean, 250 million, that's a long way from being 80K in debt. I mean,
Yeah, so it's
what's that like for you, like psychologically?
it's just a massive like adjustment in terms of what I'm able to do in life, which is great. But it also, I'm thankful that I have the perspective of being in a position where I had virtually nothing and having to like really fight to survive, because if you don't have that perspective, like you're not prepared for life really. Like you can't survive if you've only had success. The failure really drives it, and I think that has been an important experience for me.
That's so inspiring. Alrighty, so folks, good news. We actually did uncover a copy of Towerfall. Is that like a special edition?
Yeah, so this was the collector's edition for Towerfall. I can't remember all of the specific items that are inside, but you can be pretty guaranteed to know that there's a soundtrack CD in there, a game, poster. I think there's a pin, but this game is fantastic. It's
Looks gorgeous.
so many hours were lost to that game because it's fantastic. It's so good. I wanted to highlight one other section in the store, and it's my personal happy place here, which is the card connection.
Okay.
The card connection is filled with all sorts of weird trading cards that are either tangentially related to video games or directly related, or just absolutely weird left field kind of trading cards that nobody has ever heard of. Something about trading cards, I've always loved them. I've always loved this opening the pack. It's probably the gambling aspect to it that I like, just like not knowing what you're gonna get inside, and maybe there's something really cool in there, but
We've got everything from Naruto to Nintendo tattoos.
yeah, so we've got a wild selection here of stuff that a lot of people probably don't even know exists, like the Killer Instinct collectible card game.
So cool.
But even more obscure, you know, we've got the official Nintendo Donkey Kong trading card game.
No way.
How many people know that there's a Donkey Kong trading card game?
Not
and
a
it was,
chance.
I don't know, I love this kind of stuff. It makes me really happy. So when we started the store, I wanted to have a weird selection of cards.
Yeah.
It's constantly rotating. I've cursed my store employees with a back room that is just filled with boxes of trading cards. But I think it keeps it fun for the people that care about this stuff.
So I promised that we would get into some of the spicier topics. I was wondering how you would feel if I told you about the worst experience I've had with Limited Run, because I'm really curious your perspective on it.
Yeah.
So I think the year was maybe 2020, maybe 2021. I was really getting into Switch collecting for the first time. Got my hands on a copy of Celeste. Eventually, because at that point it was so expensive. It was like 150, maybe 200 bucks online. I was like, all right, I'm gonna bite the bullet. Everyone says I need to play this game. I'm gonna get it. Played it, absolutely loved it. A few months later, I wanna say, was walking around in Best Buy and was like, wait a second, is that the same game that I was just playing? And it was way cheaper.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the heck? I just bought this for like 200 bucks. And then I looked on eBay and was like, oh, now my copy is worth way less. And was like, what the heck, Limited Run? What? I thought this was limited.
So the games are always limited. We do timed limited pre-orders. So we've got, you know, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks where you can show up on our website, get things. We don't print more copies after that. We did previously have a partnership with Best Buy where during the pre-order period, they would say, yeah, give us 5,000 copies of this. And then they would get it, they would run their pre-orders, and then they would put it up on their store shelves after their pre-orders were over. But they didn't really need to run pre-orders. They had committed to a set amount. So it was like, you know, that was manufactured already and they were getting it. But the way that they would figure out distribution and how many would get sent to each area was by running those online pre-orders. We no longer have that partnership with Best Buy. Now we're more dealing with VGP up in Canada, but Best Buy would have, you know, I would say 6-7 month delay in terms of when they put it up. So there would occasionally be these gaps where, you know, it had sold out from us many months ago. Our pre-orders had ended and it hadn't been available on Best Buy, and in that kind of no man's land period of time, the prices could rise.
Sure.
And yeah, it's a bad experience to get caught in there. The other thing to mention is we don't claim perpetual rights to our software. So another reason, going back to that original question that people hate us, is they think we buy the rights to games. We don't buy the rights to any games. We sign a deal with people that says we can make physical copies, we can run pre-orders, and we can manufacture as many as are needed to fulfill those pre-orders. But then after that period, rights are back with you. So you can take that game to another publisher and do another physical run if you want.
I see.
So with Celeste in particular, you may have noticed that now Fangamer has actually brought it out again. So there is another print of Celeste back. So the value has further eroded. And that is outside of my control, because as a person who came from a development background, I don't think it's ever fair to sit on rights perpetually. It's very developer unfriendly. So I want to make sure that we can revert back. But we've released thousands of games, and I'd say it's less than 10% of those that ever get another shot at going physical. So for the most part, things still stay limited, but it's outside of our control, especially when it comes to other regions. Like, you know, say a game comes out in Japan, like we got a lot of flack for No More Heroes because we sold it, and then, you know, 7-8 months later, Arc Systems Works did a print of it in Asia region.
Yeah.
And of course, at that point, you can get this Asian English version. It doesn't have an ESRB rating on it or anything, but people who just wanted to play the game are like, well, what the hell, limited run? I thought this was limited. It's like, it's not. We're very transparent. We don't have worldwide exclusivity over our games forever. It's just not something we do.
I'm so glad I asked, because to be honest, I never would have known. I just probably didn't do the right due diligence. And in the moment, I was like, what? Limited run must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's a lot of context to this business that is not necessarily intuitive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't think that we would have leftovers, right? Like, where are all these copies coming that you're bringing to PAX or that you're selling in your retail store? And it's like, they're leftovers. They're not reprinted. We're not getting more from the factory. It's not out of print or, you know, whatever. It's like the games that we have in our warehouse are what we have, and we have to work through those. But when you think about, you know, we hit most of the demand during the pre-order period, it can take a while to sell a couple hundred leftovers.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Let me ask you this, though. What would you say to the people who say making a limited quantity of these games in the first place is anti-consumer? Like, wouldn't we all just be better off if you just made however many people want?
And that's what we try, you know, with the open pre-orders. The thing is, you know.
Which, when you say that, what does that mean?
So with open pre-orders, it means when we put a game up on our website, it's available. Anybody can come through. And, you know, I'll take a recent example. Persona 3 and 4. We put them up on our website. They were available. Anybody who wanted them could get them for 6 weeks. You know, it's like you could roll up at any point during the day. It was not like a 1 minute and it was gone kind of thing. And I was on social media screaming from the rooftops, buy this game. It's going to sell for more than we are selling it for. Please buy it.
Sure.
And I'm just getting dismissed. This game must be selling horribly. He's so desperate to move units. He's so desperate to sell copies. I'm like, no, I'm just telling people I don't want to get death. I don't want people yelling at me saying, oh, screw limited run. This game's $90 now. They're so whatever. It's like, I'm just trying to get people to buy it when it's $35.
Right.
And sure enough,
Because
ship the game in December.
The criticism's coming.
We ship the game in December, and it's $80, $90 on eBay, and people are like, screw limited run, I hate them. It's like, I'm here trying to tell people, buy this game. It's available now. It's available at the price it's supposed to be. Please buy it.
This is hitting a little bit too close to home for me.
We do try our hardest to get this game out there so people know you can buy it. You know, like, nothing is arbitrarily limited. We make as many sell. And that is how our pre-orders are run. And then after that, we don't make any more. And that's that. You know, the rights revert back to Sega or back to whoever, and then they can do whatever they want after that. But for the most part, most of them don't want to deal with the hassle of a physical release. That's why they let us do it in the first place.
Yeah, well, there's only so much that you can do on your end. It's hard, especially when you're dealing with limited quantities, to ultimately make sure everyone is happy. But you're right, it's hard to imagine a system that works better and also serves developers.
There's almost no way to effectively reach everyone who wants a game during the pre-order, because our partners aren't just sitting on a list that says this is everyone who likes this game, make sure all of them know about it. It's like we can only get as far as our marketing can get us, but during our pre-order campaign we try to be as loud as we can to get as many people in on it as possible so that there's no residual or lingering demand. And time again, what I've noticed is if we sell something during Q4, that's October to December, those games end up being absurdly valuable if they're something that's in demand. And that's because during that period of time, people don't have money or they're focused on other things. They're like, I got to buy the new Call of Duty, or I got to buy the new AAA game that's launching. And they kind of tune out limited run for that quarter. And I try my hardest to not put big releases in that time frame, but sometimes my hands get tied and I have to put something like Persona 3 or 4 in that quarter. And then it's just like, I can scream as much as I want, buy this game, please buy this game, so that, you're not trying to find it at an inflated price later. Year after year, it works out the same way.
Do you have kind of a sixth sense for that at this point? Which games are going to be?
I can tell like the kind of games I need to not put in that period. It's anything that I know is going to sell, beyond a certain threshold in revenue. We have enough data at this point where I can tell, if it's a popular game, try your hardest to not put it in this no man's land. But then we'll have things that'll be like developers who have spooky games. They're like, it's got to come out in October. And I'm like, no, October's a horrible month.
So
but then you look
on how popular a game is, you'll release it at different times.
I try to put it out, in this period of March to September, which are historically the months where we have the most ability to reach the audience that we need to reach. But if it has to fall into this weird period of October to December, which is the worst, sales go down like 30%, and then the resale prices end up going a lot higher as a result, because after the holidays,
Scumbags.
People are like, let me try to figure out how to get this game that I ignored during the pre-order period. And look, I know there's a lot of reasons people can't buy things all the time, but
yeah,
the thing that bothers me is when it gets like me trying to market the product gets dismissed as despotism. Like, I'm not desperate to move copies. I'm desperate to avoid angry people. Like, I want to make people happy. I don't want to make people angry. And that's a misconception that a lot of people have about me. They think I sit in like a volcanic lair, like twiddling my fingers, like, how can I screw over as many people as possible?
Yeah.
And there's this like innate feeling that people have where they're like, everything he does is done with evil intent, and it never is. I want people to be happy. I don't want people to dislike me or dislike my company or, anything. I want people to be able to engage with these games and play them. But if you look at the games that we've had to release in Q4 historically, especially spooky games, Outlast 1 and 2 on Switch, absurdly expensive. Those were open pre-orders. Anybody could scroll up to our website and buy those for $30 each. These games are $180 a piece on eBay now. And you could just waltz up to our website and get them.
Yeah.
There was nothing stopping anybody from being able to get them during the pre-order period. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, which I get the most hate about on Switch because it's so expensive now. That was an open pre-order December 2018. It was not quantity limited. It was a show up and we'll make as many sell.
And what would you say to the people who say, well, just do another run of it? Like, everyone wants this, just do it again.
I think it violates the agreement that we made with our customers. I mean, we have told our customers we will not reprint our own games.
Right.
So we have to stick to that. Otherwise, we're at risk of false advertising. We don't want to get into that rabbit hole of accusations there, like we made a promise and then we broke it. We don't want that to happen. So we stick by our promises, but we don't hold our partners back from doing runs elsewhere. So, there is a possibility that in the future it could come out through somebody else.
I think I interrupted you earlier. Why not just go totally open edition?
So that's a logistics problem, and it's what our partners are hoping to avoid with physical. When you look at physical games at retail, there's this ongoing issue of warehousing, management, BERs, buybacks. I'm using inventory, retail store terms that suck, where you have to put resources, personnel, accountants, all of this stuff onto this project. for years at a time to see this stuff sell through, move out. You have to charge people for warehouse space. And these are all problems that our model solves. So it makes physical not be a headache. The reason publishers and developers were getting out of physical is it was too much of a headache. They didn't want to deal
the
with
right games in stock.
Yeah, they don't want to have to deal with how many copies of this do I have to make to restock Walmart, Target, Amazon, Best Buy, or to restock a website. You know, they didn't want to have to deal with how many accountants do I have to pay to keep on staff to keep dealing with this stuff, because accountants are expensive.
Yeah.
So they were just like, screw this, we're going all digital. Because on digital, you get your monthly report, that's it. You don't have to worry about warehousing, distributors taking their cuts, markdowns, all of these things that compound to make it not worth it. And that's another thing we get a lot of hate for. People are like, Sega should have done Persona 3 themselves. And it's like, yeah, they could have done it, but there's so much headache involved in doing a physical release for traditional retail that you look at it and you're like, why would they do that? That's exactly what was causing companies to drop physical.
Yeah.
And why we stepped in to make the process easy so that they could do it again, so people could enjoy physical releases. We stepped in with a simpler model that makes going physical a turnkey thing where they can just sign an agreement and we do everything for
Makes
them.
it feasible.
The money comes in, they're making more per unit than they do digitally, and they're like, yes, we can do this. This works.
And
so it makes
collectors,
these things
it's kind
a
of
reality.
A win-win, yeah. So, Josh, I'm conscious of the optics right now of doing this interview on a resale channel, because one of the things that you guys have been criticized for is having a model that's too reseller friendly. Do you want to set the record straight at all about what your stance is on resellers? Have you guys resold your games? What's the story?
We do not resell our own games,
Yeah.
100%. I used to sell used games. Like I said earlier, my background, you know, how I survived for years was buying and selling games on eBay. And I hated, like, I loved finding the games and listing the games. The part I hated was actually, like, everything that happened after that. I haven't sold a game on eBay since 2016. And I don't think I ever will again, because I had my fill of it for a decade. So, you know, I can tell you point blank, we have been very thorough on vetting. All of our employees sign an agreement. As long as you're employed at Limited Run, you cannot sell any of our products. It doesn't even matter if it's for MSRP. You know, anything that is Limited Run related, there is a extreme no tolerance policy on selling our products as a Limited Run employee. And even at our retail store, we're very focused on, you know, if somebody trades in a Limited Run product, it's MSRP, it's not marked up. So we are very conscious of that. But with our pre-order model, anybody can show up and get a product. I don't see it being our business what somebody does with that product once they get it, because it's a level playing field. You know, if you as a consumer want to show up on our website and order 10 copies of a game, you can. There's no limit placed on it. It's literally open for everybody. We will make as many sell. So everybody has a completely level playing field. And I don't think that it's my business to feel any way about what somebody does with the products that they buy from the website. You know, if somebody looks at a game and says, I think this is one that I want to own multiple copies of and have some extras to sell down the line, you know, I feel like everyone has that same opportunity. So the pre-order model makes it a completely moot point, in my opinion. I think it was more of an issue when we had limited quantities back in 2017 and prior. That's when we were saying, you know, we're only making 2,000 copies of this.
Right.
And yeah, it would be a huge pain in my butt.
You don't want those going to resellers.
Yeah, you want those going to people who are going to keep coming to your site to buy your products. So as a brand, I was very angry about that at that point, because I'm like, I'm getting, again, I hate to keep bringing this up, but I'm getting death threats because people were using sneaker bots to buy our products before anybody legitimate could get them.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating. And I would spend hours devising ways to screw over the bots so that, you know, I remember on Toe Jam and Earl, we had this exclusive case, and there were people who had trained bots to buy them the minute they popped up. So I actually took the listing, changed it so that it was like literal trash for $30. All the bots bought the literal trash. They just received a box of trash.
You shipped it out?
Yeah.
You shipped boxes of
Yes,
trash to the
because,
botters?
No, because it was funny.
No
It was
way.
funny to me. So in that case, actual customers got the products that they wanted, and then the resellers kind of learned a lesson, like maybe don't train bots on limited run products. Granted, they got
Right.
better about it because they knew, they're probably going to get a little like
Exclude the keyword
crazy.
trash, please.
Yeah, so they started to figure out how to get around this. But what I found as we moved to open pre-orders, it's like it's a non-issue at this point because everyone can get what they want as long as they are watching limited run and showing up. We're not producing an arbitrarily limited quantity. We are producing the quantity that sells, and I think that's fair.
Well, I, for one, would never flip a physical video game. I think that's disgusting. But I wanted to ask you about the demise of physical media. Is that something you're concerned about? What direction do you think it's heading? And is that a threat to the fabric of your business?
So I think that as long as people have physical items, as long as we don't move into a world where we're all just doing VR or whatever, but I think people are going to want physicality. Look at vinyl. People, for the longest time, I'd say from the time iTunes was announced until maybe 5-6 years ago, people were like, digital is the future for music. Like, this is where it's all going. Nobody cares about physical anymore. But then vinyl came back with a vengeance to the point where it was one of the biggest revenue drivers for the music industry, which proves that like people started to get frustrated with digital. They started to realize like, hey, I have no ownership digitally. That's the thing. Eventually people are going to realize that they're buying licenses on the digital side, and those licenses can be revoked. People are seeing that, like HBO Max coming through and removing all of this content people cared about that they can no longer access. They're like, hey, this kind of sucks. Like, I wish I could have this stuff physically. And I think that's been driving people to realize like physical ownership is what I want because I can count on these things I love being available. So I don't think that's going to go anywhere. What will go somewhere is the platform holders saying, we don't care about physical anymore. We're going to stop putting disk drives on PlayStations or Xboxes. But I see Nintendo not following that trend for decades.
Interesting.
Because on Nintendo, it's still, I think 85% of first-party games are sold physically. So why would they go
rather than digitally? I didn't know that.
They're contrary to all the other platforms where Xbox, I think it's like maybe 15-20% of first-party titles are physical. PlayStation is more 50-50, but Nintendo is still very much physical focused.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that comes out of the fact that they were a toy company before they got into video games. Physicality has always been core to their being, and I don't think they're going to drop that anytime soon. I think they're going to stick to it. So I think I've got several generations worth of Nintendo platforms to still release physically on. I also think there's a thing to be said about people who grew up with Nintendo care more about physicality because there's something on the Nintendo platform. I think it's having cartridges for a very long time up to the N64 that kind of ingrained physicality into the being of Nintendo fans.
Interesting.
And I think that that's why their sales still skew so highly towards that. And it's also like Nintendo fans, I think by and large, more than any other platform, they go back to the games that they love. People who love Link to the Past still go back and play that on their SNES to this day. So people are still going to want to go back to Tears of the Kingdom or any of these Pokemon games that they're buying. So that physicality component is core to Nintendo. So I'm not super worried about it. But in the future where all physicality goes away, I think we've still got a business in terms of supporting older platforms like the NES and SNES and
or even the Switch one day.
Exactly. There could be a market for homebrew games on Switch in 20 years. Who knows? So I look at things through a positive lens that physicality is always going to be in demand. That's never going to go anywhere. Will the market shrink maybe in 20 years? It's possible, but we just have to be cognizant and aware and watching that so we can shrink with it.
I wanted to ask you also about the business side. I'm super inspired by what you've been able to build in the last, 9 years? Talk to me about, do you have any like North Star business principles that have guided you through the multiple stages of the journey?
So I mean, for me, it's about doing what you love. Like, I don't think you can do something successfully if you're doing it without passion. Even when I was reselling games that I was finding at flea markets and garage sales or whatever, I had a passion for that. I loved video games. I loved being able to hold something and appreciate the history of that game and the significance of finding it. You know, was not a soulless endeavor for me.
Yeah.
And I think that is important in terms of guiding anything you do. I think you have to do things that you truly care about. Because if you do something without passion and without soul, it's going to be reflected in the outcome and the results.
I heard you giving a keynote one time to, I think, a room full of young developers, video game developers. You were talking about the importance of starting out small, because I think a lot of the people in your graduating class at, was it game development school?
Yeah, at North Carolina State University. So I was in the computer science program, and
Yeah.
everybody that wanted to make games in there, they wanted to like get out and just immediately make this giant game that they'd had in their heads their whole life. And it caused them to become jaded and not want to make games because making this big thing is impossible.
They never
You know,
finished.
they never finish it.
Yeah.
But if you start small, you can finish that, and it gives you a sense of accomplishment to take on something slightly bigger next, and then you kind of scale up from there. So even with Limited Run, that process and principle was followed, and we started with our own game. We didn't dive in and try to do something huge. We tried to do this little game that we made, prove out the concept, and then build from there. And our release schedule, I think at least early on, was maybe one game every 2 months or whatever. It was very slow, very considered as we rolled up and scaled up to figure out what we could handle and what we could actually take on with our skill set.
As your release schedule has grown, as the company's grown, there have been some people who have said that Limited Run is now more focused on quantity than they are on quality. Do you think there's any reality to that?
There's absolutely merit to that. So throughout the pandemic, you know, there was this huge demand for collectibles, and people were just buying anything to fill the void in their soul that the pandemic had created. And we got way too overzealous during that period of time in terms of signing too many games. And we got into a bit where I almost feel like we were doing things without passion. So I was going against what my principles were.
Just to try to keep up with the demand.
Just to keep up with demand, because there was so much demand. We were like, we don't want to leave anything on the table. And there's also this, you know, I love games, so it's like, of course I want to own all these games and have them up on my shelf.
Yeah.
But we lost sight of the passion during that period of time, and we really got carried away in terms of bringing too much stuff to market. And we have drastically and dramatically scaled back post-pandemic. You know, we're left with this backlog of games we've signed that we still need to work through and release. So there's still going to be a bit of a quantity over quality problem for a little while, but as we work through this, you're going to start seeing the fruits of this new focus we have, which is quality over quantity. Better titles, bigger games, fewer releases is really what we're focused on right now. That's kind of our guiding principle in terms of what we're signing and the content we're chasing.
Wow. That's really cool to hear that you've sort of made a pivot almost backwards.
Yeah.
That's kind of unintuitive.
Yeah, it's really a matter of just kind of having to respond to the market and be quick in that, because every collectibles business has seen a post-pandemic drop-off. Like, everyone's going outside and enjoying life again. They're not, you know, retail therapy to deal with the troubles that are plaguing them. It's more like, I'm gonna go outside and walk. That's how I'm gonna deal with, you know, any issues I have. So we're realizing that we need to be releasing games that people actually care about. And I mean, that's also, I think, the driving principle that we should have been focused on from the beginning is like, do people actually care about this game, or are they just going to be buying it to speculate? You know, it's not healthy to run a business where people are only buying things to speculate.
Yeah.
And that was a problem that we tried to address early on, you know, and shift towards, let's focus on games that people really care about. So yeah, it's definitely been an experience in terms of learning to roll with the demands of the market and, you know, what people want.
In 2022, you guys were acquired. Walk me through, because at that point you had been building this business for 7 years.
Yeah.
What's that like psychologically to go from like owner and CEO to just CEO?
It's been weird because I am the kind of person, I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. Like, even when I was 5, I would go around my neighborhood selling oranges from the orange tree in my backyard. So like, I've always been very focused on like, how can I fund myself, however I can fund myself. I don't like having to answer to somebody. I don't like it. I like to act on my passions and my own whims. There was this period of time where we were seeing like all of the partners we were working with were being acquired. And I was like, at some point, we're going to have to fall into that too, because we need the resources of a bigger company to help allow us to continue growing. We were hitting a point where I felt like, we had grown to an amount of revenue and a scale of operation that I didn't really fully know how to manage myself. And I think that caused some of our shipping and fulfillment woes, where it's like, again, it goes back to my eBay thing. I don't like the part that comes after selling the game.
Yeah.
I like the part leading up to the sale and the sale itself, but then it's like after that, it's like I'm always focused on the before part. And getting a bigger company involved is helping us sort out the part that I hate. We've got somebody in now as a chief operating officer, a new COO, who like really loves that part that I hate. So I guess the yin to my yang, where it's like, I love the first part, he loves the last part. So our fulfillment has been getting faster, it's been getting speedier. Our warehouse operations have been getting more professional and more smooth as somebody has actually been here that loves it and is focusing on that aspect.
Yeah.
And it's rare to find somebody that actually likes the part where you're putting stuff in boxes and getting it out.
The logistics.
Yeah, for most people, it's just a relief of knowing, hey, I got that thing out. Thank God. I can focus on the fun part now, which is, the sale itself. That's kind of what's come out of that I have liked, even though there has been some adjustment to, having to work within a larger structure and have a boss. But one of the things that attracted me about the company that acquired us is that the guy who's the CEO of it is a huge collector. Like, he's legitimately, like, he loves collecting stuff. Like, he was telling me last time I met him about how he just bought a abandoned video store in Sweden because he wanted all the VHS tapes that they had, because he wants to collect VHS tapes right now. So he's building a collection of VHS tapes. And he was telling me the first time I met him about how, he's really proud of how many NES games he has. And he was telling me all about his copy of Gimmick that he has, the Scandinavian release of Gimmick for the NES, which is super valuable, super rare. And he was just so proud and excited to talk to somebody about it. And that made me comfortable in the acquisition, because it's like, I want somebody who owns us to have the same passion for this business that I do. They have to get it. Otherwise, I would never even consider it. I would never want to sell to somebody who's just, all I care about is the money, the bottom dollar, because that would force us into that situation we were in the pandemic, where it's just sign as much content as we can because we got to make the bottom line. Having an entity above us has allowed me to say, we can refocus. We don't have to worry about the bottom line or chasing revenue growth. We can focus on chasing a healthier business. So that's what we've been focused on for the last year or two since we've been acquired. It's how do we make this business more healthy?
Well, that's a beautiful thing. You've been in it now for 9 years. Limited Run is a household name among collectors. What's your end game?
I just like making cool stuff. So I don't really have an end game. I just want to keep making cool stuff, because for me, I am legitimately through and through. Another thing I think people have that's a misconception about me is that I only care about money, that I'm in it for greed. For me, I make decisions on what we release and what we do based on whether I want it myself. It's all about, like, I want to make the products that I'm putting up on my own shelves. I'm not trying to do it for money. I'm trying to do it because it's exciting to me. Some examples of releases that, if we were only in it for money, why would we have re-released Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, one of the worst games of all time? For me, that was because it was neat to do. It was a cool idea, a cool thing to chase. Why would we have done a physical release of Chex Quest, which is a cereal game that came boxed in packages of Chex in the 90s? Like, to me, that was about doing it because it was for me. It was because I wanted to do it, because it was neat.
Yeah.
Not because it was going to make us a ton of money, but because it was neat. And that's my driving principle. It's like, I want to keep doing cool things, neat things.
That's inspiring. I have to say, getting to meet people of your caliber has been easily the most rewarding part of my YouTube journey. So when I say I appreciate you having me out here. It is the understatement of the year.
Well, I appreciate you coming out and actually, checking out our store and, giving me a chance to talk about some of the, challenges we've had and the issues we faced as a business.
Appreciate you a ton. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Folks, I just created a playlist of all the business interviews I've ever done. I'm gonna link it right down here if you're interested. If you like this video, I'm sure you will love it. And I'll catch you guys on the flip.